remember that when things get rough, you can always leave over there and come here to Sankofa Post and sit down and relax. Because this is the liberation space and the liberation zone.
And Black Lives, the idea behind this was to try to bring together some of the concepts that I believe may be connected and how gentrification got to where it is, as well as to tie that to Dr. Welsing's challenges that she's had. I believe Dr. Welsing was here in the summertime with a film called Flag Wars, which was talking about gentrification in Columbus, Ohio. So Dr. Welsing has been fighting a real good fight. She's going to follow me in about 45 minutes or so and kind of talk about what she's been going through. But I want to go through some ideas and concepts and have a discussion about this, because I think that if we're clear about what happened to us, hopefully these things will not continue to happen to us. All right. So some of the previous presentations we've had in this series called Educational Incarceration, which we've been collaborating with the Students Against Mass Incarceration at Howard, as well as the Kwame Ture Society. Mama Abena Walker, a legendary educator in this neighborhood of DC for years, and a young, real vibrant scholar, Baba Tishango, that was in November. We had another discussion with a very serious journalist, one of these investigative journalists of a very high nature, Khalil Abdullah, talking about prison privatization. He's passionate about that for quite a long time. And we also had a film screening by Professor Alonzo Crawford from Howard University that he had done in the 80s about overcrowding in prisons in Baltimore. This was a film that we showed that's about a year and a half old called The House I Live In. It's a documentary, and it really thoroughly documents the epic of mass incarceration. And interestingly, it ends with, starts with us and ends with white folks doing crystal meth in the Midwest. Very powerful film also. We did this community discussion with Kwame, with Nkichi, and she was talking, as she does very eloquently, because she's been doing this work for about 30 years, about justice or just us and the criminal punishment system. Did a great job. And the most recent one was by Professor Ray Winbush. Ray Winbush has a great book. It's kind of hard to see right here. It's called The Warrior Method. I highly recommend that book. I think it's here today. And it talks about bringing the black boy to manhood. That's going to be a recurrent theme for the next couple of minutes that I'm talking about. How do we make mature men? And I think mature men would have seen and been able to prevent some of the things we've had happen to us. Not everything, of course. All right, what is gentrification? Shift in urban community toward wealthier residents. I think the bottom line is probably the most important. Population migration, which may involve poor residents being displaced by wealthier people. Everybody's seen that. That's not a new thing. And I just want to put it in a context that I think gentrification is a symptom, and it's a part of a pattern, the kind of pattern and systems that Dr. Welsing has been talking about for a long time. I'm from New York City. I'm from Harlem, actually. So just a couple of slides to give you an idea of what I see when I go back home. Gentrification in Brooklyn. Gentrification in New Orleans. I don't live in New Orleans, but parenthetically, at the time of the funds coming back to New Orleans, Cynthia McKinney was one of the only people saying, what about those big New York developers coming into these meetings? Why are they here? Cynthia was right on it. Gentrification Detroit. Any Detroit people here? Detroit's been bombed out real bad. Gentrification DC. Gentrification DC. And my home. Gentrification Harlem. No longer majority black. Harlem is in transition. Now, a lot of the folks who live in Harlem might disagree with that, but, and I don't know. I've not done the statistics. One thing my wife always says, go and do the statistics, because sometimes they will lie to you and say it's already a done deal, where it may not in actual fact be a done deal. Okay. Anybody familiar with this name? Chinwe Izu. Chinwe Izu is a Pan-African scholar. He's one of the sharpest people on the planet now. He puts a Pan-African blog out about every 3 or 4 months. The purpose that we should form study groups around the kind of things he's talking about. What did Chinwe Izu say? One of the first orders of business for Africans after the ending of colonialism should have been for us to be certain that what happened to us would never happen again. Didn't happen, kind of still not happening. So Chinweizu was on that in a big way. Okay, so my question is, does gentrification have a recognizable pattern that we can dissect and learn from so that we can prevent it from happening again, a la Chinweizu? Or is it part of a similar pattern of land expropriation that we've seen before? I call this a plot in 5 parts. Introduction of confusion, misinterpretation of what's actually going on, organized violence. One phrase of organized violence that I heard Jesse Jackson, the first one, talk about was called economic violence, organized removal, and the penultimate, now the land belongs to somebody else. Introduction of confusion. Drug abuse, easy to figure. Books, education, not always as hard to figure. Tyler Perry. Any Tyler Perry fans? I don't admit it now, okay? All right. Misinterpretation. Groups under attack begin to argue amongst themselves. Something from the outside comes to attack all of us, and we start to have different opinions as to what's going on. And of course, I'm using natives here because all of us in this room probably have some native blood, and what's happened to them is legendary. But Crips and Bloods were doing the same thing. My wife's from Philly. She said, you know, the brothers from Philly would go to school at Lincoln, and they'd have the same beefs they was having because they was from different gangs in Philly, and they had schooled at Lincoln. Something's wrong with us. Organized violence. I got up here to Federal Reserve for a reason. My wife's folks from Philly. Frank Rizzo, 8th grade education. CIA. This is a brother in where? Where is this brother? Where is he doing right now? Speak up, speak up. Afghanistan, in guarding an opium field.
For the United States.
For the United States, U.S. troop. He might know that these stuff he's guarding is going to come and hurt one of his cousins. He doesn't know. Organized violence. Okay, real quick. Secrets of the Federal Reserve. I'm going to pull from different places. Some stuff you may have heard, some you may not have heard. This is a difficult, hard to find book by Emissary Press, and it's a very enlightening book. And it talks about, you know, the real underpinning of the economy of some of the countries that we know and love. Rothschild in 1773 said, what? We're going to use alcohol, drugs, and moral corruption and vice to systematically corrupt youth of all nations. That's 1773 he said that. That's a long time ago. Organized removal, what is that going to look like? If you've never seen this picture, these are Namibians who were being, what do you call it, Holocausted by Germans, 19th century, before their Holocaust. Namibians, okay? I visited a place in Ghana called Sinmanso, and it's like the last bath from walking in from the interior out to the ocean. Organized removal. This is pretty much what we've been trying to cover for a long time. How we do this incarceration thing. Organized removal. Where is this? Native American reservation. Where is this? Bantustan, South Africa. Looks similar. When the South Africans came here to figure out how they're going to run apartheid, what did they do? Went to Alabama, said, how are we going to do this thing? What do y'all do with the Native Americans? Good idea. Afterwards, the land belongs to others. That's part 5 of my 5-part plot. And everything from here on in is going to be a part to fill in some of the pieces that I believe are part of that. What does gentry mean? Of gentle birth. I told this Dr. Welsing the other day. She said, what? Andy Shalal was running for mayor a couple of days ago, and he was talking about racism in Chocolate City. My wife and I were in a meeting. Not a meeting, but like a mayoral kind of a dialogue. And one of the people says, yeah, I'm white and privileged. I don't know about racism, but this is a vanilla city. Now, this is one of them situations Dr. Welsing has been asking for a long time. Tell us what white folks say when black folks aren't around. I think she had a couple of drinks, didn't see me over there. She just started talking. All right. Y'all know what plurality is? Anybody not know what plurality is? Plurality is not just like an election where 50%, 51% wins. If you have 3 candidates, 40% might win. They have a plurality. They might have experienced a plurality with the recent election. Okay, from 2012 is what I got off the most recent census. I don't know what 2014 numbers are. 50.1% African American, 42.9% white. Don't forget this, people. They think this is now Vanilla City. All right. Amos Wilson, one of my favorite people. Amos Wilson said their white power began to realize the profitability in driving our men crazy. Let that one sink in hard. This book is here, and you should own it. Amos was brilliant. Amos Wilson also said, if your enemy has more guns and bombs than you have to outthink them. All right. Amos Wilson, one more time. He used to say, we are behaving as if our minds are being controlled by demons. Many of us have difficulty conceiving that others conspire against us. That's denial. Dr. Welsing has been dealing with patients with denial for a long time. Now, denial is hard to break. Denial is very hard to break. Amos would ask us, what are we educating our children for? If you had any other answer beside this, he'd tear you apart. I'm sorry. Any other answer beside this? Education should produce group power. Otherwise, what good is it? Hugo Chavez, bad brother. Hugo said we have to out-organize our enemy. This print is kind of small. When we were children, we were told that we have a motherland, and that motherland was Spain. However, we have discovered later in our lives that, as a matter of fact, we have several motherlands, and one of the greatest motherlands of all is no doubt Africa. We love Africa, and every day we are much more aware of the roots we have in Africa. Racism is very characteristic of imperialism. Racism is very characteristic of capitalism. Katrina has a lot to do with racism, no doubt about it. Hate against me has to do a lot about racism. Because of my big mouth, because of my curly hair, and I'm so proud to have this mouth and this hair because it's African. Hugo Chavez. Bad dude. All right, Doc, you ready for this one? Dr. Welsing told us this in 1970 at a lecture. 1970s, probably 77. She was one of my instructors in the psychiatry class. One day you may need to get a pass to get into D.C. She said this in 1977. One day you may need a pass. Everybody said, oh, come on. Come on. And the last conversation we had, she always ends with this. What's going to happen to the black people in D.C.? James Weldon Johnson. Lift every voice and sing. He said this about Harlem in the 1930s. Anybody cannot read that? Bantu Stephen Biko, the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor, the mind of the oppressed. Urugu's available today. One of the best books written. It's about 20 years old, I think, this year, 1994. And it talks about the critique of European cultural thought and behavior. It's a very long, detailed book. You got to have a lot of patience to get through it. But she made it difficult for a reason, because after you get through it, you really understand process. And the 800 pages can be summed up in 3-4 words. Control over the others. Chinwe again, this is his most famous book, The West and the Rest of Us, White Predators, Black Slavers, and the African Elite. Chinwe says what? We need to build a black superpower in Africa in this century. This is a quote from Garvey, too. Chinwe is a big Garveyite. Chinwe says we need to bring Garveyism back. He talks a lot about the African elite. African elite is rough, because some of these folks are in our families, on our extended families. And they do and say things that hurt us. And we're not exactly sure how to deal with them. Frederick Douglass said you take them out back and you beat them. I'm not saying that. I can't say that in a public forum. Marcus Garvey. Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey. Chinwe said you should read every day something from Marcus Garvey's Philosophy and Opinion. Alton Maddox, one of my heroes, has been damaged, terribly damaged. Malthus said in the 60s, white folks didn't change, we changed. He also said, some folks would like to equate black lives with white feelings. You talk about your issues and the life of your people, you might hurt their feelings. Department of Defense, this is their quote. All right, from 1944, The American Dilemma, Gunnar Myrdal wrote this book, and it was because he was commissioned to kind of try to find out what's going on with the race issue in the country. The book was supposed to be written by Du Bois, but the Pew Foundation said Du Bois might do the wrong thing, so they gave it to this guy. He's an economist from Stockholm, I think. There's no doubt that the overwhelming majority of white Americans desire that there be as few Negroes as possible in America. If the Negroes could be eliminated from America or greatly decreased in numbers, this will meet the whites' approval, provided it can be done by means that are also approved. Correspondingly, an increase in proportion of Negroes in the American population is commonly looked at as undesirable. 1944. And the reason the book is called Dilemma, an American Dilemma, because there was a dilemma between what the Americans said was their creed of justice, equality, fraternity, all of that, and their treatment of black folks. That was the dilemma. All right. A little bit more about confusion. First Americans and land. The plains folks were stealing from each other. Divisions easily exacerbated by guns. Annihilation, habitation on reservations. And the Buffalo Soldiers, I think maybe later on came to realize the role that they played in this. Not a good chapter in our history. First Americans then and now. Chinese dealt with Opium War. They were getting jacked up. United States of America, Union of South Africa. Propaganda. This is Garvey. Among some of the organized methods used to control the world is the thing called propaganda. It has done more to defeat the good intentions of racists than even open warfare. A method or medium used by organized peoples to convert others to their will. We, the Negro race, are suffering more than any other race in the world from propaganda. Garvey. Again on propaganda. Propaganda to destroy our hopes, our ambitions, and our self-confidence. This is a book that's not that easy to find. Holland ain't nothing but a third world country. The greatest strength others have over us is in their ability to create self-doubt. Let that one sink in. Dr. Welsing talked about that a long time ago, too. Oh, a little bit of propaganda. Did this guy free us, or did these folks free us? Propaganda. Was Malcolm who we thought he was, or was Malcolm who this guy and his team said he was? It's a very disturbing book. Any of you have heard about it, not read it, or whatnot. It's very disturbing. And unfortunately, WPFW, Pacifica, has not taken them to task. As a matter of fact, they even promote it in fundraising drives. It's a travesty. Okay, I call this, there was a bookstore in New York called Michaud's Bookstore, the House of Proper Propaganda. This is proper propaganda. This is Peter Bailey. He has a book called Witnessing Brother Malcolm, the Master Teacher. That's his newest book. He knew Malcolm. He was the first author and editor of the newsletter for the OAAU. And this is the correction piece that Jared Ball and Todd Burrows did. So I encourage both of these books for your library. Proper propaganda. Propaganda, Dr. King, The Dreamer. Community of Chaos in 1967, a very different critique of America. You should own this book. You should own this book. King was very serious about what was going on, what needed to be done. He went to every white folks, black folks, labor, clergy, everybody. What you have to do to fix this country. More propaganda. This is a subtle one. This may take you all by surprise. Harlem Renaissance. Who named the Harlem Renaissance? Who named it? Hubert Harrison said it's probably named by some white folks. Literary Garveyism. Why literary Garveyism up here? Because the writers who came to prominence in the Harlem Renaissance, County Collins, Orville Hurston, Claude McKay, they had written for Garvey in the Negro world before they became known as the Harlem Renaissance writers. And there's more to it than that. Anyway, we need to study this literary Garveyism. It's a fantastic piece. And Garvey has been absented from Harlem Renaissance history. If you go to start asking about Harlem Renaissance, Garvey's name almost doesn't even apply. Doesn't even show up. Propaganda again. Everybody's heard this, right? Problem of the 20th century, problem of the color line? It's Du Bois. Garvey said this. Creating power. That's a whole different approach. You're waiting on somebody to be nice to you here. And I don't think Du Bois was in any way trying to be silly. I think he was trying to be practical. But this is a whole different way you're raising your family right here. How did this guy come to prominence? This is Skip the Facts Gates. How did he come to prominence? How did he come to prominence? Anybody know? Do the young folks know how he came to prominence? The movement towards education, the movement towards challenging the present canon of knowledge by Dr. Jeffries and Smalls, professors up at City College, was gathering a lot of momentum. They were teaching in the community every Saturday. This guy got an op-ed in the New York Times. But anyway, I wanted to look at this at the bottom because he's always talking about the reason reparations shouldn't be given to black folks is because a few black folks were involved in the transatlantic slave trade. It would be messy. It's a problem. Now, he is now teaching us about Afro-Latins and, you know, your own history and a lot of stuff. Dr. Jeffries, like I say, call him Skip the Facts Gates. But the bottom line, he has gotten a lot of juice. And a lot of black folks who don't come into a bookstore like this will challenge you and beat you up. Well, didn't you see Gates? Well, Gates said this, and his show said, yeah, but, you know, who is Gates working for? Not working for us. All right. Proper propaganda. You know who these two people are? Chancellor Williams, Carter G. Woodson. You should own their works. That's all I'm going to say. You should own their works. Proper propaganda. Super Bad Sisters. Super Bad System. Anybody not know who this is? All right. You can admit if you don't know. We ain't going to get mad at you. Okay? All right. I'm just trying this on y'all. Bam. Mind eraser. Bam. Propaganda. When my daughter was going to Spelman College, they were promoting these two sisters. Y'all know who this one is? Of course you do. She was the one who was apologizing for 9/11. You know who this one is? This is Rice. This one here was telling Clinton, don't make too much of Rwanda. It's an election year. Susan Rice. Don't forget. All right. Long slide. Chinwezu. Rectification of term. Chinwezu is a writer and a scholar, and he's dealing with language. He's dealing with how we're going to deal with reality. The way reality is perceived and acted upon depends crucially on how it is packaged, on the framework within which it is presented, and the concepts and terminology used in presenting it. This is not an innocuous matter. Innocuous means it's not frivolous. It has meaning. For example, to teach a child that an adder, which is a snake, is a rope. I'll say it again. To teach a child that an adder is a rope is to program him for fatal risk. Sounds silly, but it's true. For if asked to pick up the rope, he may pick up an adder from the ground and get bitten to death. And you know, Africans love analogies and stuff, right? Likewise, there is danger for people who live in a dangerous world which has been described innocuously or neutrally or euphemistically by their enemies. Everything's cool. Y'all black folks are doing just fine. Don't worry about a thing. Y'all dance real good and you cook good chicken. Y'all doing fine. They would live in a world with a false sense of security, a false conscious reality that could be dangerous to their survival, like a child in the den of snakes who has been taught that snakes are ropes. So if the world is dangerous and you think everything's cool, you will behave a certain way. You might even like Tyler Perry. I'm using a couple of words here. I'm gonna play with the words just for a quick second because a lot of us believe that discrimination is what we're facing, which is true. And Keisha started using this a lot in her talks. And I pulled this up because a lot of us think genocide only means killing. Genocide also means deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its destruction and also causing serious bodily or mental harm. Okay? It's not just the killing. The killing is a part. It's the end part a lot of time, but not just the killing. Okay? I'm saying we got to think about this very seriously. Forcibly transferring children from one group to another, that's happened to Native American people, that's happened to Aboriginal people, it's happened to our people. Okay? So we got no problem with this. Books that you should own. Now I put discrimination up here again. Unfair treatment of a person, group, race, minority, blah, 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 blah. Is that what we're going through? Unfair treatment? I don't know. This book was written in 1950. This book was held up for a long, well, the United States did not sign the charter against genocide because they knew that black folks would bring it to their face, and they did. A brother named William Patterson, signed on by Du Bois and Paul Robeson and folks like that in the 50s. Some of us believe that that's when they started the McCarthy thing. I'm not sure, but I got to ask somebody about that. But a lot of people who thought about that said they're connected. We Shall Genocide, again, comes out of Malcolm X grassroots, one every 28 hours. A brother or a sister's getting killed. That's not discrimination. All right, Chinwezu again, changing terms. He says that the whole notion of saying we suffered in a transatlantic slave trade is inappropriate. He says there was a black chattelization war, chattel, making us chattel, property. So that there's no difference between colonialism and slavery. Same Holocaust. Africa is a battlefield. America is a vast work camp. It's a totally different way to think because you think colonialism was a little easier. You know, slavery was not so bad in the Caribbean as it was here. Whatever you want to say. Whatever you come up with as a rationale. And I'll leave you with that. All right, I'm trying to get into some meat. Nixon's war on drugs. $1 trillion spent. 2.3 million in prison, over 500,000 for drug law violation. You know, Jimmy Carter said the punishment should not be worse than the crime. Jimmy Carter said that. That's before Reagan came in, because Reagan expanded it. $41 billion could be saved every year. But maybe they don't want to save money. Sir Richard Branson, this is the guy who owns Virgin Airlines. He said the same thing about the incarceration, racial discrimination, and targeting. Arrested at 2.8 to 5.5 times for the same infraction, and $300,000 to incarcerate, $11,000 to spend on public education. Something's wrong at the level of the central planners. Black men incarcerated since Brown versus Board of Education, skyrocketing. All right, skyrocketing. And I'm going to go into a little bit of economics, and then we'll see what that can look like. Okay. The largest prison-owning corporation issues massive dividends of how much? $675 million to shareholders? Think there's an incentive to putting us in jail? Okay, now this is an interesting saga. I'm sorry, click that. Have y'all heard this story? Teen elephants? Ah, good story. Teen elephants. They had found there was a problem. They had separated adult elephants from teen elephants in a reserve someplace in Africa. I'm not sure where. And they found that the teen elephants were going, challenging the rhinoceri and crushing them, killing them. Killing them, the teen elephants. Rhinoceri are strong, they ain't as strong as a teen elephant. What did they have to do? They had to bring back adult male elephants. Cooled everything out. Okay, so I don't think we're that much different. This is a horror. 80,000 million spend 23 hours a day. 80,000 Americans. And some things, private prisons are the new slave ships. Okay. Michelle Alexander said reparations should be paid. One thing that I think that nobody really says is that the increase in incarceration, she says it, and I've thought it for years, that it came as a direct result of our activism in the 60s and 70s. A direct result. Right? I want you to say this to your people, your friends, and your colleagues, to say, the reason our people are being incarcerated because they got afraid in the 60s and 70s. See what they say. Ask them they believe that. I don't think most folks make that connection. No. Bubba and Junebug are bad. That's why they're in prison. Nah, that ain't it. Y'all saw this, right? More men in prison than were enslaved in 1850. That's impossible to believe. Catherine Austin Fitts. This is somebody you would probably not have heard of unless you study economics and of like, finance, blah, blah, blah. Her name came to me through my friend James Granger. A true insider. When I say an insider, I mean an insider. Her mom worked for the Federal Reserve. She was a Republican kind of fundraiser. She worked for an investment bank and then worked for HUD, Housing and Urban Development. A true insider. She started peeping the stuff about what was going on inside of HUD and urban development. They ran her out of town. Death threats, tried to poison her, all kind of stuff. True insider. So it's a long document. Write this one down. The Aristocracy of Stock Profits. It's an obscure document, about 100 pages long. Goes into all kind of details about, movement of money, drug money, laundering money, housing and urban development, all this kind of stuff. There's a clear pattern. And if you want to see a Rosetta Stone for drugs in the community, all the way to gentrification, this is the Rosetta Stone. Okay. Large investors like Harvard investing in the prison industry. Matter of fact, in the document you'll see there's a brother named Ederle, who's a Harvard-trained lawyer. He's now dean at Berkeley. He was one of the masterminds of finding ways to move government money to private prison money. Black-trained lawyer. Yes, one of the guys at Frederick would have something to say about. Okay. Anyway. So she does this whole thing, and she's a white girl. She's trying to be correct. She does this whole thing. She explains this whole thing, goes into great detail in front of a white congregation. She tells him, do you know that your money is tied up in this drug business? Do you know that your money has been, used to incarcerate these people? Do you know that your 401k is all of this kind of stuff, your pension, blah, 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 all this kind of stuff like that? Now, don't you believe that we need to eradicate? No, she said it like this. Would you be willing to shut down this operation, this unethical, immoral, illegal operation that's enriching your pension fund? Would you be willing to shut that down? Because you know it's wrong. White folks said, are you out your mind? No way. Read it. It's incredible. Drug money laundering, just really quickly going through this. This is horrible violence in Mexico. Mexicans have been catching hell for a long time. And billions of dollars seep into the global system, global financial system. Wachovia is a part of Wells Fargo. So these guys get dinged, right? How much they get dinged? They get dinged for 1.2 billion. How much do they make? You know, money moving through there? For, 80 billion a year. I mean, so they get dinged 1.2. Okay. Eric Holder doesn't prosecute anybody. And this guy, Jim Willey, he's another gold writer. He says drug money is critical to the survival of the global financial system. So you're important. And getting you confused is very important. Another gold writer, J.S. Kim, these bogus wars are there to enrich people that started these wars. Bankers enslave a nation with debt, and that debt makes their nation enslaved. Today's bankers have successfully brainwashed millions into believing that they are being patriotic by supporting their unjust and often unnecessary wars, when in fact bankers use our unthinking, uncritical jingoism as the very mechanism to enslave us all. This is a young Korean guy who writes about finance, but he's talking about the drug war too. All right, I'm going to run through these fast. I just want to hit you with the impact. Prison labor. These are companies that engage prison labor. They're banks and energy producers. There are energy producers and utilities and insurance companies. There are pharmaceuticals, manufacturing companies, telecom, transportation, other U.S. companies, prison labor organizations. This is a bad one. One reason prison population is exploding is because prison companies have an airtight business plan. They sign contracts with states obliging them to fill prison beds. Y'all heard this before? Somebody got to say this don't make no sense. A little bit on the wealth gap. I thought this might come in quickly because gentrification is really about wealth, right? There was a study that came out about, wealth gap, and it said, male and female wealth has always been a problem. It's really severe for our sisters. If you've not seen this one, hold your hat. Single white woman wealth, 42 grand. Single black woman wealth, $5. Is there a problem here, somebody? Yes, there's a problem. Married a little bit better, but they're $167,000. I wonder why these white women that work with me can always work part-time. I don't know. All the sisters working full-time, trying to get another job. All the white women, I think I'll work only Wednesday and Thursday next week. Obama says he'll deal with the social ills without actually framing them as black problems. So that's not working either. Okay, 8 Americas. Anybody heard about this study? A study followed by Atiba told me about this study. Atiba Kopic, a brilliant researcher. There's a huge disparities in who lives the longest and the shortest in this country. Guess who lives the shortest? Brothers living in the ghetto. Urban males live 20 years less time than Asian females who live the longest. Here's my Harlem and Dr. Welsing from the South Side. 2/3 of the brothers in Harlem on the South Side will not see age 65. And the problem with that is that as you get through all of this madness, you start to understand some stuff and you get to be more valuable. Your knowledge gets more valuable. The elders become more valuable in their knowledge. Gentrification and health. I'm going to go through this quickly. Health problems that come along with gentrification. Many health disparities are increased when you have starting to have gentrification and displacement. Shorter life expectancy, higher cancer rate, birth defects, infant mortality, asthma, diabetes, cardiovascular disease. All of these things start to increase when you start displacing people. A couple of more things about gentrification and health. Affordable housing. Affordable, healthy housing. You all seen pictures of those places where how people used to come from the South in the Great Migration, live in rat-infested places. Healthy food choices. They call these places food deserts if you don't have like a really full-service grocery store. Transportation, quality schools, social networks. And the last couple, stress levels. Violence and crime, mental health, social and environmental justice. These are all related to gentrification. And I'm saying it's all a part of the same saga, but it's been broken down like this for now. Post-traumatic stress. Brothers in the neighborhood have post-traumatic stress high or higher than Iraq, Afghan, or Vietnam vets. That's the kind of stress our brothers who come to these hospitals have. Post-traumatic stress. So we deal with them. We got to understand these guys, be calm with them. Take time. They're not all the way, together. Many times, it may take a lot of conversations just to make them feel comfortable with you because they have a lot of issues related to just trust. Post-traumatic stress. This is a bad one. I had to put this in there. Baba Tishango had this. Moving on. CDC has some strategies to eradicate. I don't put a lot of faith in the government's stuff because they are good at writing stuff, bad implementation stuff, bad at implementing stuff. But they give you some strategies. Create affordable housing for all incomes. That happened in D.C. Shalal was at the talk and he said affordable housing in D.C. means $80,000 a year income. That's what they mean by affordable when they talk to the developers who are developing D.C. 80,000. Approve policies to ensure affordability, increase assets. That means people got to have work, reliable work. Consider home ownership and explore job creation. These are all CDC. CDC is the Center for Disease Control. And also ensure that new housing-related investments benefit residents, involve the community. Anybody was asked when they started doing all the gentrification, any of y'all in your community, anybody was asked about, to be involved in decision making, any kind of, we're going to set these things up? I wasn't, and I've been living here for a good while. Allow the community about input, educate about options, and create organized bodies. That's what we got to do now. Like Cesar Chavez said, we got to organize our bodies that mitigate gentrification. All right, closing up now. I got this from Ray Windbridge. 10 things we can do. Ask your family and friends if you think young African Americans should be locked up for crimes that white youth are not locked up for. It's not a comfortable conversation. You might not want to have it after they give you a nice meal and dessert, but find a way to ask them. Ask them somehow. Be honest with our families about the unfairness of the current criminal punishment system. This is in Kichi's term. Criminal punishment system. Teach them how it is utmost importance to avoid them being caught up in it. Any lawyer you know who deals with this will tell you, keep your children, keep your family out of this system. 10 things we can do. Ask family, friends, clergy, elected officials what they're doing to bring justice to mass incarceration and the financial incentive to lock us up instead of educating us for better lives. Got to ask, you got to get in their face and ask them, are we doing anything? Because back in the day, the clergy was very active. A lot of us wouldn't have been able to do what we were able to do if the clergy in the South hadn't walked across the Pettus Bridge and things like that and taken those hits on the head that we didn't take, but they took them for us, so we can do better. But we can't stop what we do. 10 things we can do. Become part of a community-based program that works to improve the lives of African people. Got this about recidivism and youth. The most effective programs at reducing recidivism rates and promoting positive life outcomes for youth are administered in the community outside the criminal or juvenile justice system. Community-based programs can reduce recidivism by up to 22%. Recidivism is people going back and forth. Support black business. Support this store right here. Buy a book or a DVD a month. Go out of your way to buy black. Study the lessons of the past, especially Marcus Garvey. Believe this, 992 branches around the world. Is that 1,000 branches around the world? Shipping, publishing, factories, educational, Black Cross Nurses, Black to Africa Project, and read philosophy and opinions on a regular basis. It'll change your thinking. Consider boycotting businesses that profit from prison labor. We had that long list I just showed you. ALEC is this legislative council that does all of this madness. And ask organized labor folks how they can compete with prison labor. They can't. They cannot. There's no way. Organize study groups and share information about the issue of gentrification and black lives. Familiarize yourselves and contact elected officials at state and county levels to determine if they provide private prisons with a minimum percentage of filled beds. That slide we showed, see if they're on board for that. And also ask them if they got campaign contribution while you're at it. Ask your school, place of work where you worship if their funds are invested in private prison companies or companies that benefit from prison labor. That was a major part of what we did for the Free South Africa movement. There's a young brother in the house I live in. He's in Sioux Falls, Iowa, or something like that. He got caught with 3 strikes. He's going to do 20 years for some reefer or something like that. He said, look, I can't change this inside here. We need people outside to change this stuff. It's not going to change from inside. It can't. 10 things we can do. Malcolm talked about making sure we mature. You might not be able to see this in the back, but Malcolm has a quote that says, this country will let a black man grow up, but it will not let him mature. I contend that having mature black men in our communities is probably the paramount issue. I'm sorry. Hope I'm not being sexist. I think it's the paramount issue. Like those elephant teens who were killing people, killing rhinoceros who did nothing to them. And of course, this is our dear beloved Malcolm. 10 things you can do. Consider and promote maturity, group cohesion, and group self-interest as major determinants of community wellness. Discuss what we have in common, stop arguing. Dr. Welsing started saying to stop arguing about 30 years ago. Stop arguing about silliness. Just stop. Just stop. Nana Cooperative would say women are our organizers, men are our stabilizers. We got to work together on these issues. The last but not least, support those who support you. I'm done.
To respect ourselves so that we can be aware of when forces in the environment are moving against us, that we are not confused. The force of gentrification is moving against us. Instead of crying about it, we need to say, no, gentrification is the same as apartheid. It means white in, black out. It means that white people can have bicycle paths. Whatever they want, they can have. Clean streets. 10 police cars a block. So white ladies can walk in shorts at 11:30 p.m. See, but I say the failure to find the little girl, the little 9-year-old girl, the failure to help the man who was across from the fire department, all those people piled into homeless shelters, like the little girl's family. See, you can't simultaneously have a government that is bringing in one kind of people and pushing out another kind of people, and have that same government apparatus be sensitized and tuned in to the welfare of the people they're pushing out. See, that's pushing out people saying, we don't want you. So how can you think about their welfare? No, you can think about the welfare of dogs being comfortable in a park. So let's wake up and think about it. It's no time to hate, just time to get tuned in and understand what the deal really is and speak to it. Speak to it. We don't need to be saying, I don't know why this is happening. All of this is happening because of the dynamic of racism, white supremacy, which is white genetic survival, preventing white genetic annihilation. Same thing Tuskegee syphilis, same thing HIV/AIDS, same thing Ebola. Self-respect will help us tune in and decide what do we need to do. You see, but starting with focusing seriously on ourselves, valuing ourselves. Let me close with Neely Fuller in his textbook on victims of racism and white supremacy. And he's the first person to talk about racism as a system. And he listed behaviors, 10 behaviors, that will really begin to transform black people. He calls them behaviors in counter-racism. I call them, in addition to counter-racism, exercises in black mental health and black self-respect. See, the system is attacking us 24/7. Everything that they say is a disparity. Diabetes, hypertension, kidney disease, all of this is related to 24/7 stress. So if we begin to learn these behaviors, and people can practice them as individuals. Stop name-calling one another. See, call people by the name they wish to be called. Stop name-calling one another. Stop cursing one another. Stop gossiping about one another. Stop squabbling with one another. Stop snitching on one another for reasons of personal gain. Stop being discourteous to one another. Stop being disrespectful to one another. Stop stealing from one another. Stop robbing one another. Stop fighting one another. Stop killing one another. And I add to that list, stop using and selling drugs to one another. Stop making black children think that as children, they can be adequate mothers and fathers under the conditions of the white supremacy war. Stop throwing down trash where black people live, work, and play. Stop believing in welfare, believe in prosperity. Stop pretending that racism, white supremacy does not exist. Stop allowing white supremacy to divide black, brown, red, and yellow people. Thank you all, and I hope that that will be helpful. Any questions or comments? Yes.
Actually, I have two questions.
Okay, speak loud so everybody can hear.
Actually, I have two questions.
One at a time.
Well, I'll take the easy. Have you done any research regarding Afrikaners who migrated into the United States very silently, migrated into the United States after apartheid?
No, I'm not. Speak to whatever you have in mind. What?
Well, the mere fact that, and I saw this happening where the Dutch Reformed Church was very quietly allowing Afrikaners to come to the United States, who have become infiltrated into the structure society during the time after apartheid.
Okay.
And so now, and I've been talking to people about if there has been some research. That's why I wanted to ask you about that.
I would just say that the people who classify themselves as white can teach the Afrikaners. Do you see what I'm saying? In other words, it's not like the people here needed to be taught about racism and white supremacy. Do you see? There may be slight variations on the theme, but it's basically fundamentally what you do to black people if you want white genetic survival to take place.
Okay. My second question, and then I'm done. And that is, you speak about the feminization of men. What about the masculinization of women, lesbianism, and how that has impacted our community?
I think that's a good question. In other words, if you take, and this is what has happened systematically in our family structure and in our communities, like if you remove the men, and then the woman is put in the position of being the protector for the family, as well as the nurturer of children. And then they start wanting to talk about Michelle Obama is angry. Do you see? Or the angry black woman. Do you see? It's what position has the woman been put in? I mean, in other words, racism is war against black people in general. But I emphasize black men in particular so that we can understand if you remove men from the family, then you're in a state of genocide. Do you see? But all they needed to do, just like in a war, what is the critical point to attack? And then everything else begins to fall apart in the process. Do you see? So attack the men because the men are the threat to white genetic survival.
Was lesbianism helping or not helping the black community? How is it impacting the black community?
Well, see, I say that a population of people, a group of people that want to project themselves 10,000 million generations into the future have to value male-female relations. You can't put male-male, female-female on the same plane as male-female. Do you see what I'm saying? And I think that even though white supremacy as a system dynamic is a powerful dynamic, I say it's on the decline. Do you see? Because it's necessary killing. It has to kill and kill and kill and kill and kill in order to survive. And so once, if you kill and kill and kill, then you are devaluing human life. If you devalue human life, you will devalue the act that produces the human being. Do you see? But they're trying to take black people along with them, and we have to say that's not our training. Okay. Yes, sir.
I agree that in the premise that we have to change our mindset, but I have a question as to whether or not the actual thing that we need to concentrate on is not the part of not recognizing racism, but is whether we want to concentrate on the game. I think sometimes.
You said whether we want to concentrate.
On the game. I think sometimes that we spend too much time trying to deal with the game instead of strengthening. And you did say this, and I guess I'm saying it in like a different way. But there's the mindset that rather than worrying about the game, we need to strengthen the who we are with that and passing that on to our children instead of saying comparing this to white people. This is who we are. We're strengthening who we are. And I said you spoke to that, but I think sometimes we get caught up in trying to worry about trying to deal with the game instead of strengthening who we are. We get lost in what our real concentrations are. I mean, for me, it's very important. I don't have children of my own, but I have a lot of grandnieces and nephews. And I said, baby, do you know that you're black? And they say, yes, auntie. I'm auntie. I come from a generation where we were brought up as to being proud of who we are, which is, again, going back to what you were saying, of knowing your strength. But I don't blame racism on the things that we now kind of, I mean, it is a continuous force, but I can't blame that as much as saying that we've lost the foundation of who we are and the strength of strengthening who we are with our young people to say, we don't have to worry about that. Don't worry about the game.
Well, let me
You don't have
answer.
to try to get in the game. You need to be strong with who you are, where you came from, what God has given you, and what you're doing. That's what you need to concentrate on. That's what you need to have as your foundation. Because the United States is a very racist place. When you go someplace else, it's not about the color and the race. Then they will find people who fear you will find something else to bombard you with, whether it be religion, whether it be race, whether it be something else. Then they're going to find something to try to break down your strength.
Okay, let me answer. Let me answer
So
in
I
this
think
way.
our mindset needs to change and work with our young people to say, be strong with who you are and do that, but don't let the game interfere with what you have to do in being the individual and the culture that you are.
Okay, let me say this. That I'm a third generation physician. Father physician, his father. Let me say it this way. I'm a third generation physician. Father doctor, his father physician. And that in medicine, you want to find out about causation. You see, when you go to the doctor, you don't say, doctor, just treat my symptoms. I've got a cough. Would you please give me a prescription for some Robitussin, or just tell me what one to get at the drugstore? Those are symptoms. And I got a headache. A good doctor wants to know what is at cause, because the person could have cancer. You see, if it's cancer, then you want to know that. What exactly need to understand the game. Do you see what I'm saying? The person has to understand the total situation so they understand where the behavior fits. Because I guarantee you, a lot of the people who are going around singing about nigger, bitch, and gangster and thug, they feel they respect themselves, but they don't understand the context. Do you see? So I would always advocate, why not talk about it? See, it's like the Semites of the Jewish religion may not have wanted to talk about anti-Semitism when they were being attacked. Now that's all they can talk about. Because they should have been able to see it before they were killed. Do you see what I'm saying? So I
Not
say,
exactly there, because see, my point is, if you have the strength, somebody's telling you that the words that you're using, that if they think they have self-worth, and someone didn't teach you that that is not self-worth, that's the core that I'm talking about.
okay, let's say if you got grandchildren, right? You don't let the children just do anything they want to do. You guide them. You see, you tell them what behavior. And if you see them doing something that is incorrect, you guide them away from that. And to the extent that you can, you tell them as much about that wrong path
Right.
as you can.
That I agree with.
So that they, what? Of all things, get understanding and get wisdom. Okay, thank you.
We were here for 2 hours and it's now 6 o'clock. We have to give the store back to the store owners. I hope that you don't mind me. It's not my store, but I gotta give it back to the store owner.
Thank you.